Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Welcome back to Equine Assisted World. I've got Christine Doran, like Duran Duran, but only one Duran, not two, who runs Triple H Ranch in the Chicago area. And what's unique about this place is it's not just a therapeutic equine place for humans. It's also a full-on proper horse rescue, like proper job horse rescue. I've been there a couple times, and it is always kind of educational to be reminded what levels of abuse and neglect, even in today's America, horses, animals, and I guess people still undergo. And so much of it is hidden. So somebody has to be there in the front line to mitigate this. And there she is. She's sitting in front of you, Christine Doran. And of course, she's then rehabbing these horses and giving them second lives as equine assisted partners. So it's a wonderful, wonderful ecosystem. And it's something that should be an inspiration to us all. So Christine, thanks for coming on. How did you get involved in this and why?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I actually got started with this 20 years ago when I was in high school. And it just so happened that everyone was talking about what they wanted to do with their lives that day. And I looked around and I was like, well, I'm 16. I have no idea what I want to do with my life. So I have a very conversational relationship with God. And I was driving home that day and I was like, all right, why am I here? I love people. I love animals. I love helping them. Like, what's my purpose? And I'm like, if you could just give me a large sign. And before I said amen, I looked and I was like, well, we both know what I'm like. I'm going to need a large flashing sign. And so I said amen. And the moment I said amen, I was driving past a strip mall. And while I was at school that day, they put up this huge electronic billboard sign and it's flashing. It's in all caps and it says, call Good Samaritans Boys Ranch today, exclamation point. And I was like, oh, thanks for the flashing sign. So I pulled over because it's pre-cell phone days and I write the number on my hand and I go back home and I call and I say, I know I'm going to sound like the crazy kid, but I really felt like I meant to learn about your program. And it just so happened that the executive director answered the phone and he spoke with me for an hour and a half about how they use horses to help heal troubled youth. And I was like, okay, I know where I'm going. But I was 16, so you can't jump into something like that. And so I thought the best thing that I could possibly do was get into therapeutic riding and start helping out, starting to see different disabilities. And I did. I went
You were
every
already a horse girl, I take it.
I was
Yeah.
first put on a horse when I was 18 months old. And two of my sisters, I'm the youngest of 10. So I always say
Wow.
chaos does not exist. Life is an ice skating rink. Wear your skates or wear your shoes. Choice is yours. Like being the youngest of 10, you have to be able to adapt and pivot like no other. So that I think has helped me immensely being able to run Triple H because no day is the same. There's always, you could be planning to do all of this and you get an emergency call and your
Yeah.
whole day gets thrown out the window. So I started volunteering with those. And then right after high school, 2 weeks after it, I left and I moved to Madrid, Spain for 3 years.
As you do. That's very random. Also for a horsey girl from the
A little
Midwest.
Missouri girl to just
And
jump.
and also, yeah, because it's one thing to go traveling in an English speaking country. As you and I both know, English speakers tend to be incredibly lazy about having other languages. That's an incredibly unusual decision to have made at that age. There must be a story behind it, please.
There is. So my sister Jennifer has actually lived in Spain for 30 years. And so she's
Again, Midwestern girl from Missouri goes to live in Spain. Not quite so usual. Let's
that's
have the
quite so usual,
story.
right? Us
How about
Durans,
that?
we just don't fall into the usual, okay?
Okay.
Ask anyone. No, she went for a semester abroad in
Okay.
college and fell in love with it. And then she got a job for a magazine company where she sold articles, like to do marketing articles. And she traveled all over the world. And so she's been to over 36 countries. She lived in 8 different countries, but Spain was her favorite country. So
Yeah.
she settled there. And I understand why. I love Spain. I
Yeah. It's hard
absolutely,
not to. Yeah.
yeah, it's such a special place. And so I became the assistant director of an English academy out there where I taught English through
You're how
real.
old at this point?
I was, let's see, I went out there at 19. Yeah.
How do you become
Because my
something?
sister owned her own company.
Ah.
And I went from being a helper to quickly moving up to being the assistant director. You ask
Yeah.
such good questions. It's family.
Yeah.
Connection,
Where you're sort of born into the union, but you have no vote. Yeah, right. Yeah, got it.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I lived with her for 9 months. And then she happened to have a house about an hour outside the city. And
Okay.
I jumped at the chance to live on my own. And I remember I was one time I was in Madrid and I was like, oh my gosh, what kind of life am I living? Like, how blessed am I? And I go to like take in the air and I end up coughing. I'm not breathing Missouri air. And at that moment, I was like, it's time to move out of the city. I'm going to need some fresh air again. And one of the first things I did while I was there was I looked up therapeutic centers that were in the area.
Okay.
And I happened to find this amazing woman named Maria Jose. And she allowed me to exchange English lessons for her teaching me how to run a therapeutic center.
Okay.
And it was very eye opening to me. I had always had, when I was taught how to be around horses, it was very cowboy up. You tell that horse what to do. And I was never taught the proper way to really fit tack and just really make the
Okay.
horse important. And so it was very eye opening for me to go, whoa, there's a whole other world out here. And so I stayed with her for those 2.5 years that I was out in Juncos. I went like weekly and worked with her. And then I actually, after the first year, went back to Missouri,
One
realized,
quick question. Is
yeah,
Maria Jose still operating outside Madrid?
I believe she is, but I haven't spoken to her in years.
What is the name of her place? I'm just can feel a
Now
podcast.
that you say that, I'm going to have to do some research. I'm going to have to go back into my emails and see what it
Okay,
was.
would you?
Hannah.
Because
Yeah.
this is clearly
Yeah.
someone I think we should talk to. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm
Maria
going to
Jose outside. What was the name of the town?
Juncos. It's Yuncos.
Juncos. Okay. While you're telling us the rest going on, I'm just going to do
Yeah.
a quick
So
Google. Okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
that's great. So I actually went back home and I got there and I realized that Missouri was just too small for me. And I literally booked another ticket back out to Spain and hopped back across
Okay.
the ocean again for another 2 years. And then I really felt a calling to go back to school, start my own business. And I absolutely would have stayed in Spain and done it. I just could not handle seeing my sister running her own business, that you would go to one place, they would tell you, these are the rules, do this, this, and this. And then you go to the next place and they're like, well, that's not it. But there's like no cohesiveness between places. And so I was like, I don't want to hire a lawyer for every little thing that I have to do with a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And so I decided to come back to the States. But since I felt like I had outgrown my town in Missouri, I decided to set up shop in the Chicagoland area. Both of my parents are originally from here. And
Okay.
so I thought, if I fail miserably, I've got people to fall back on. Thankfully, I didn't. So I ended up going on a blind date and meeting my husband, and rest is history there. But
Well,
we
I've met
just,
him a few times now, and he has that slightly bewildered look of a man who met a horsey girl and can't quite remember what life is actually like now. Yeah,
His
yeah.
mother tells me, she says, I have no idea like how he actually got with you because you are just everything opposite of what that man like could have possibly ever dreamed of. She
He's a
explains
super
it so
sweet dude.
well. She says that I have never colored inside the box in my entire life. And Matt doesn't even know that a box exists because he colors so far inside the lines. But
Perfect.
opposites attract, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It works for us. So yeah, I moved back to the States and I started going to university and I got an
What did you go to
opportunity,
university to do?
marketing
Okay.
of all things,
Ah,
because I knew I wanted to.
handy if you're going to go run a center, though.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
figured I would need to know how to do things if I was going to have my own company.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to work for a place called, excuse me, the Disability Resource Center. And I started out, the executive director, she has cerebral palsy, and she needed someone to be her assistant, to be her hands. And so I
Hmm.
got to see the inner workings of a 501c3.
Okay.
And then the opportunity a couple of years later came up for me to be an advocate for people with disabilities. And I loved that job. I loved
When
it.
you said the opportunity came up to be an advocate, what does that mean?
So they had a job opening that they needed another advocate. And so I stepped away.
And what does it mean to be an advocate like that?
So that is where you're like a social worker without the degree. You have
Okay.
people coming in that may need housing, may need mental health services.
Okay.
There's a wide variety of, you had people coming in that, were dealing with DCFS and they needed to know how to better themselves, that just didn't have the
What's
education for it.
DCSS?
Yeah, so that's like a Department of Family Services. So like when they come in before they take your kids, they usually
Uh-huh.
try and keep you together and you have to follow certain things
Protocol.
in order to keep your children. And
Okay.
so a lot of times it was lack of knowledge. People didn't have tools on how to be a good parent. And that's stuff that we would help them with. And so it was a very rewarding job. But I found there were two things that were really disheartening. There was no funding for people,
Mhm.
and there were no programs for mental health. And that started to weigh on me.
Mm.
So
Yeah, because
uh,
I guess the majority of people in that family situation you'd be dealing with, there would have been so many mental health issues there. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot, a
Yeah.
lot of mental health.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just really began to weigh on me that I couldn't help these people. There was
Mm.
nowhere else to send them to. And I
Mm.
kept hearing a whisper, it's time to start your nonprofit.
Mm.
And I kept going, well, that's sweet, but I really like a steady paycheck.
Yeah,
So,
no kidding.
no thanks. And God likes to knock me hard since I'm so thick headed. And in October of 2014, I suffered a traumatic brain injury. I was riding one of my horses and she loved to buck. And I had been riding her for like an hour and a half. And I had just gotten over influenza and had a really bad day at work. And I was just going to ride it out. Thought I'd try some new tack. And I was so weak that I couldn't even adjust myself when my saddle started to slip, that I started to go under her. And she was very green broke that if I would have gone under her, she would have killed me. She would have trampled
Mm.
me. And so that flight or fight response kicks in. And I threw myself over her. And when I did that, I caused shaken baby syndrome pretty much on myself, that my brain rattled around different parts of my skull. And then my foot got stuck. My right foot got stuck in the stirrup. And I knew if I didn't get it out by the time I landed, that I would be dragged. And so I used those precious moments to get my foot out and just took a really hard landing. And
Yeah.
so I was wearing a riding vest, I was wearing a helmet, but I suffered a compression injury on my right shoulder and a compression injury to my right hip. And then my head did not hit the ground, but the
Okay.
force of me throwing myself did the damage. And unfortunately, the doctors that I saw didn't tell me how serious it could be if I didn't lay low. And so I
Why do
was,
you think they didn't do that?
I really think there wasn't a real knowledge with TBIs. It was really just like, oh, you've got to yes, they said traumatic brain injury and not concussion, but nothing was explained to me. No papers were given. There
So
was
they
just,
knew it was more than a concussion.
they did know it was more than a concussion. And I got told, well, try and get into a neurologist. And they gave me a couple names, and it took me, I think 3 or 4 weeks to get into a neurologist.
Mm-hmm.
And on my third week, my girlfriend from college got married. And so I went out and I drank like a fish and
Right.
danced the night away. And I remember getting into the car that evening and telling my husband, I said, something's very wrong. It doesn't feel right. And he said, you're drunk, go to sleep. And what I didn't
Reasonable.
realize is
Yeah.
that the first 3 weeks that you suffer a concussion
Uh-huh.
or a TBI, don't think that it has to just be a TBI. You could just have, your whiplash concussion. Those first 3 weeks are incredibly, incredibly important to not jostle your brain, to not have any alcohol, that you can make it severely worse, which is what happened in my case.
Okay.
And so I went from struggling to barely making it. I
How
went
were
in,
you struggling before?
it was more of really intense headaches, just feeling like I was a bit sluggish, like if you have some brain fog,
A bit underwatery.
but not, I wasn't in a state where I was like, oh, well, something's severely wrong here. It was more like, oh, okay, I got a little bit of whiplash. I'll be fine. It's just going to take me a little bit longer to do my work at work. I'll have to take breaks with my bad headaches. And then after I went drinking and dancing, I just jostled that brain so much that it was like I just crashed downward, where I went into work the next day and they ended up taking me to the ER because my face was swollen.
Okay.
And my boss asked me to do an Excel sheet of just putting together, like, I don't know, there's something about like schools' names and their contact information. And 6 hours later, I didn't have one name done. I could not figure out how to get what I needed to from my head onto the computer. And when she came in and looked at me, she immediately put me in a car.
You danced and you drank, and
Yep.
then
And then it all went to
your
hell.
face swelled and they rushed you to hospital.
Yeah.
So what happened?
There was no bleeding in my brain or anything. It simply was bruising in different parts of my brain, is what they said. And that's why they said it resembled like the shaken baby syndrome. But it had huge lasting effects that for a year I couldn't drive. My whole personality changed, where I think I'm a pretty kind person and you would not have wanted to know me during that time. I had major anger issues. I was very impulsive. There was no filter. So I just said what I thought in that moment. I had such hatred towards people, which I knew wasn't me. But to be honest, I couldn't give two cares that it wasn't me. It was such a weird space to be in that I would look at Matt as he walked out for work every day and I'd be like, well, if he dies in a car accident, oh well. And then I would have like 1% of the time I would break down crying. Not that I actually felt love for him, but I knew somewhere I did. And I would cry to him saying, I think you're going to leave me. And I don't, I was so open saying, I don't have feelings for you right now, but I know what we had before my accident. And I'm afraid this might be the end for us. And so we went and we spoke to the neurologist about it. And he said, this is going to be the biggest test of your guys' lives. That Matt, either you'll hold out and one day she'll wake up and she'll remember she loves you again, or you'll leave before that happens. And it's
Did you
really
have
up.
kids at this point?
No, we did not.
Lucky you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very fortunate, because you hear some of those stories that people get these head injuries
Mm.
and then they become different people. And I did. I was so hateful and had so many horrible thoughts in my mind consistently that I started listening to Christian music, because I thought it's pretty hard to say really horrible things if you have Jesus loving music playing in your ear constantly. And I hated that music. I was just like, it made me cranky to listen to it, but I could remember that that wasn't I didn't listen to Christian music beforehand, but I had nothing against it. But I was trying to come up with ways because no one had any insight for me of how I could get through this.
What was interesting though is that despite the fact that you said you didn't give a shit, you clearly did give a shit
Yeah,
about not giving a shit. Otherwise, you wouldn't have looked for strategies. So
for strategies.
where where was can you describe that little part, that 1% part must have been more active than just occasional, or you wouldn't have resorted to these strategies, right? Must have been there
It must
in
have
the
been there
background.
more than I thought because I
Mm.
wanted my old life back. I was not happy with what I had. I may have
Were
been
you
very
able to work?
I was not.
Okay.
I was not. And
And
the worst part was is that people kept saying, you can't play this card forever. You need to go back to work. And
right.
so it was like 4 or 5 months in, I tried going back to work because I was feeling such intense pressure, but I
Uh-huh.
literally had to relearn how to touch my fingertips to my thumbs. I lost that coordination.
Okay.
And and to try and explain to someone when I looked just like I do now,
Mm, mm,
but on the inside, I felt
mm,
so broken
mm.
and no one gave me any space to heal there because I looked fine.
Have you subsequently done much research into TBIs? For example, I had an ex-girlfriend whose son fell down the stairs and he became kind of semi-criminal. You hear about other people having TBIs who wake up and can suddenly like play the grand piano or speak French.
Yeah.
But why do you think it is that we hear more stories about it bringing out a massively demonic or negative side of the human psyche? Why is that, do you think? Why
I
not
don't know.
why not an infinitude of different
Right?
responses?
My thought, and I don't know if I'm right or not, but my thought is that we love to push so much down where we try and mold ourselves into something that is perceived as what people want,
Mm.
that when you hit your head, that all goes out the window. That's not an importance anymore, that there's nothing holding any of that back, that it almost just kind of, I don't know, I felt like it just bubbled out of me.
I mean, right, but you would think that as much as that as much as we repress, we express, right?
Yeah.
So there's also a lot of and not everything we repress is I'm just curious about this. Not everything
Yeah.
we repress is negative. Like sometimes we repress immensely joyful sides of ourselves or
Most
immensely
definitely.
spontaneous sides of ourselves. Why do you think more of those things didn't come out?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I'm gonna have to really think about
It's
this because
intriguing, isn't it?
it's really intriguing of why I had such a negative side come out of me when and that you hear so many more negative sides come out of people when they hit.
I'm actually doing a little Google here. Why do TBIs? Because and the neurologist didn't have anything.
Now, unfortunately, my neurologist was so old school. I wish I would have been in my right mind, right? That I would have gone. We have world renowned doctors here,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I didn't go to one of those. My, you know, the local hospital sent me to a local guy here who once I had actually started to heal a few years later, I had heard like, "Oh my gosh, he's so old school." He didn't I wasn't put in any type of therapies for my head, nothing. I was even told not to take ibuprofen. And the headaches that I had were worse than childbirth. Like they were so intense and they were never ending for me that I used to just sit with like an ice pack and a tennis ball behind the back of my head because the pressure was so immense. And and here I was told not to take anything. And so I was just listening because I remember going to him and repeating myself every single time. And I would take a recorder with me and I would take a notebook with me and saying, like, I can't function as a human being. What do I do? And there was never, it was just, well, time. You just need time. That's all you can do. And they
I'm
finally, yeah,
Go
go ahead.
ahead. Keep going, and then I'm gonna read
Yeah. No,
what I've
they
got here
they
because
ended
this
up
is
kicking me out of like my physical therapy because
okay.
the shoulder and the hip were healing, but I had so many visual issues from it that the floors would move up and
Okay.
down, the walls would come back and forth, that they actually kicked me out because I wasn't having enough improvement. that the insurance wouldn't continue to pay for it. And so instead of them sending me that, now I know that there's specific therapies for traumatic brain injuries. Like my mother suffered a traumatic brain injury last year, and they had her in therapy specifically for that for months on end. I was never given any of those options. And so
Was that
it,
because of your insurance company or just because less was
no,
known back then?
I had the most amazing insurance that you could ever ask for when I worked for DRC. I truly think that it wasn't until a few years after my TBI that the NFL really started talking about TBIs. And I think
Ah.
that was the big shift, is that suddenly it took a forefront that they were seeing big famous people having these different things happening with their head from concussions. And it started to be a spotlight and things started to change within the system.
Alongside the really negative behaviors, were you ever violent?
No, I wasn't violent. I just thought horrible things in my head.
And then the question then, why do you think you weren't violent? Because some people do get violent. And then the second
Yeah.
thing is, were you did you have as much depression, or were you not depressed? Were you actually more stimulated?
No, I was severely depressed. And my
Okay.
anxiety, to this day, I still have to work on my anxiety. I did a
Okay.
lot of therapy for it to be able to control it. And I truly think my saving grace was horses.
Almost
That
certainly right. Mind
most,
you,
yeah,
not that they don't shake your brain.
right? I mean, she caused it, but really it was my fault. I shouldn't have even gotten on. And it really was a turning point for me because I couldn't drive for a year. I didn't ride a horse for at least 9 months. I just didn't have the coordination for it.
Mhm.
And so I started really researching groundwork and how to have a
Okay.
relationship with a horse instead of me telling the horse what to do, how to have that true partnership with them. And that was a game changer for me. I felt like that I had had so many moments where I got my horse to suddenly listen to me without even touching her, just using
Mm,
vocal cues. And it was
mm,
this eye opening experience for me that this horse, that when I would get on her, would just run and not stop. Suddenly I could get her to turn and turn different directions just by a vocal cue. And I was like, I'm on to something now. This is what I want to do. And it was really the beginning change for Triple H that I ended up starting. My injury was in 2014. And then 2015, I started Triple H Ranch. And that
okay.
was the beginning of it, that I could no longer do my actual job. And God forced me into Triple H. And one thing that my neurologist said was be outside as much as possible, be with nature as much as possible.
Why
And
did he say that? Did he give you a reason?
he just told me that the mind does well being grounded. And, I get it. Like I do Reiki and everything. When you're grounded, you just do so much better. And I think he had something to it of not having that overstimulation of the lights, everything going on. There
Mm,
has to be something to it in that way of I couldn't go into a grocery store for over a year because when you walk in, yeah, there's the bright lights that could affect you. But what you don't understand is how much your brain processes without you realizing it. So I would walk in and I would be like, cash register, woman with blonde hair, blue pants, Snickers, Kit Kat, and anything that I saw, my brain was registering, but screaming it at me.
mm.
That my brain would get to this point where everything would just go black, that I couldn't process anymore. And I would just be left standing there like an idiot. I couldn't move. It was like
This
the brain
sounds this
shut down.
sounds like what Rowan, my son, describes in his early years of autism.
It could be very similar. And maybe that's why we're so good with our programs, is because I had such a sensory processing, just everything was all out of whack. And then I had a major processing delay where someone would want to give me their phone number. And if they said like 70, that still sounded like someone was going 70.
Okay.
I couldn't process it, that I needed the time. And it was unbelievably frustrating to know what I wanted to say and no one giving me the time to get it out because silence is awkward. And what I say now is silence is key, that we give each person that walks through our doors the amount of time that they need to be able to communicate with us, and not what society expects a normal time to be to communicate. And I think it's what makes us so powerful is that I really pride myself in teaching my staff and my volunteers to really take the time to get to know this person on a personal level and realize that there's no awkwardness with pauses, that
Yeah.
that true growth can happen with those pauses. Because for me to try and get something out, someone would say it again to me and I would start the processing all over again. And I would just scream explicitives in my mind to them, like, shut up. I'm working so hard on the inside.
What, how could you, with all of that problematic stuff happening in your brain, take on the complexities of opening and starting to run an equine nonprofit? Because then you're going to need to deal with people. You know, a
Mhm.
lot of one of the most asinine things I think one hears horse people say often, dog people too, is I love horses, I hate people. And it's
Yeah.
like, that does not help horses, because horses are social animals who,
Mhm.
interestingly enough, love people. Same with
Yeah.
dogs, and thrive when there's good human tribe, domestic
Mhm.
horses, and do not thrive when there's dysfunctional human tribe. And they certainly don't want the pressure of just one monkey, you know,
Yeah.
on them. They want diffuse, you know, diluted personalities in the same way that, you know, kids do or whatever. It takes a village to raise a child, blah blah blah. So, you know, I know, when you are at the helm of an organization that has
Mhm.
that number of variables, and you got to, you know, chase the funding and all of that, how on earth could you do that with what was
I
going on with
started
your brain?
very small, very small. My focus was training the horses first, where I went, okay, I can do stuff on the ground, so I'm going to do stuff on the ground.
So you use
And
it as
then,
your own therapy, effectively.
yes, it was my own therapy. And then I
Okay.
found that I could really understand that there was a couple of girls that I had made like a Facebook page. That was something that I took me a while to do. Everything was like slow motion for me. Nothing came quickly.
Doesn't sound like it. You had an injury one year and you opened the nonprofit the next.
Yeah.
How was that slow? Was that slow for
Well,
Christine?
it was very slow once I got started with it because then I couldn't be at my job. So I had to come up with something. I was like, what am I going to do? Because I can't, there was so much pressure from the people that I knew saying, get with it, get it together. You look fine. That it was, I felt this burden upon me. Instead of choosing healing, like of just being still, I felt this huge pressure to get going on something.
Sure.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I really feel like the horses were such an integral part, and God was so good at putting people. When I made that Facebook post, I had a mom with two girls who said, are you looking for volunteers? And the two girls were twins, and they had some sensory processing disorders, some on the autism spectrum. And I related so well to those girls. And I think it's because there was so much inside that was going on with me that was relatable, that
Mm.
I was on a level almost with them on some things. And the thing that we really connected over was horses. And so they started on the ground with me too, learning what I was doing. It was trial and error. And as I started to get my feet of like, okay, I feel like I have a handle on this. I feel like I can, it was to the point when I started out that I couldn't even watch my horse go in a circle. My brain just couldn't move that quickly.
Yeah.
And it was like these little baby steps that I was doing that eventually these girls took lessons. And so I started out with three kids, just three kids in a lesson. And then yeah, you say I was moving very slow. I know you're joshing with me, but then the next year, like in 2015, late 2015, I got pregnant. And that was a huge
So
surprise.
things must have improved between you and your husband.
Yes, I like doing that. Or I just liked sex, don't remember.
Well, here's a question. Had your sex drive also gone during the really bad time, or was that always there? And then if it was always there, did you then reject him, or did you still want that with him, but not the emotional connection?
You know what was strange is I wanted more sex, but it was because I was trying to find an emotional connection
Okay. And then getting frustrated when you couldn't.
and I couldn't.
So,
I
so
got
there, so there must have been more than 1% of you then, you're right, looking for that. Otherwise, you'd have rejected it completely.
rejected it completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. So that again, that part of your subconscious brain clearly knew. Just before we go further on with,
Yeah.
I just want to read you what I got about
No,
this
let me hear it.
because I think it is helpful. So I typed in, why do TBIs often bring out negative behaviors? And it says, because they damage the specific, I mean, this is AI, obviously. They damage the specific parts of the brain responsible for regulating emotions, impulse control, and social behavior. The frontal lobe damage reduces the braking mechanism for self-control, emotional regulation. We know this, that it makes you blunt, risky behavior as well.
Yeah.
The amygdala and limbic system, damage to those areas can cause intense, sudden emotional outbursts, such as unwarranted fear, rage, or rapid shifts between extreme emotions. Then there's neurochemical changes, because if the injury disrupts neurotransmitters, it affects how the brain produces information, perceives threats, causing the brain to overstimulate or react defensively. It's so interesting. It sounds so like the early, forms of extreme autism. But what's
Yeah.
interesting to me is it still doesn't, to me, quite, and it says egocentric behavior, but it doesn't quite answer why it can't also bring out the opposite effect of over overly positive or overly
Yeah.
enthusiastic, but maybe it can, and maybe it's just that that's not perceived as a problem, so maybe it goes
Literally.
under the radar. And it also made me think, just quickly, back to sort of medieval history and ancient history and so on, what, psychopathic behavior
Yeah.
among sort of knights and warlords. And so I guess if you're getting just whacked on the head so massively all the time, falling from your horse, bash, that there must be so many people walking around like this. And then you could like put a whole city to the sword, right?
Yeah.
And not give a shit. And then I've often wondered too, why are so many people in the horse world, you know, so like this? And it does make me think, well, a lot of us have fallen on our heads a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of my dysfunctional behaviors, down to that.
Yeah.
I've fallen off a lot of horses, So it's just, these are interesting questions, aren't they?
What was really interesting is I never woke up and loved my husband again. It was that I
Okay.
fell in love with him again.
Okay, so you got
But
to experience it a second time.
I got to experience it a second time. And now we laugh that when I'm really angry with him, I'm like, well, damn it, I chose you twice. This is my fault.
Um,
Because you have to have humor. It's something
it's
that I
hard to
still.
imagine being angry with your husband, and as I've met him, and what can he possibly ever do that could make you angry? I mean, he's
No, well, he can drive me really insane. He's very good at it.
um,
Sure, your wife could
well,
say.
yeah, but I mean, I think with me, the reason's a bit more obvious. I mean, I'm
No, I'm very
obnoxious.
blessed. I have a very good husband.
No,
I
you
mean,
do. I mean, he,
how many people can say that he does the laundry, he does the
well,
dishes?
I actually do a lot of that stuff too, but
Yeah.
I can just be very obnoxious, whereas I think your husband is much less obnoxious than me.
Yeah.
So it's just hard to imagine him triggering. Um,
Right.
but
Yeah,
hey,
he's a very good man.
humans are funny. But can you describe again? We're going to go into a non-profit, but I think everyone would be
Yeah.
intrigued to know, what did it feel like? How was it different to fall in love with the same person the second time? Question one: did you remember how it felt to fall in love with him the first time? And so, was there a funny part of your brain contrasting and comparing? And then the
It
second
wasn't.
question is, how did it differ?
No, there wasn't a like, oh my gosh, this is so different. It truly, I think, was that he was so steady in how our life was and was so consistent with me that I truly think I fell in love with him the same way that I did beforehand
Okay.
because he is so kind and truly wants to see the best in someone.
That's what he's such a kind dude. How can you possibly get so
I
angry
mean,
with him?
how many
I'm
people
on.
can say that like their husband lets their wife go live out her dream and doesn't,
Yeah.
bring in anything to support things, that but he believes in what I do and is always for me putting money back into scholarships instead of bringing
Mm,
it into our house or
mm,
like there's so much. that he sees the good that's happening to other people,
Yeah.
that he is always for me doing this.
If you're in the equine assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children, helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have taquine equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients? Taquine equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this. Yeah, there's no question he's a very good man. I can definitely see why you fell in love with him twice.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to me. So you didn't feel it was a different experience. You felt it was perhaps the same experience as revisited.
Yeah. Do you know, I didn't even realize I was falling in love with him. It was just one day I woke up and I was like, I kissed him and I was like, oh my gosh, like I really feel it's not just chemistry. I can feel that love between that kiss. And it was just like this eye opening moment for me of like everything that he's doing is making me want him more. I want to be with this man. But it wasn't oh, I've got back what I had. No, it was this very slow and steady months on end of
Okay.
him just being consistent with me.
And then back to when you had the TBI and were in the sort of grip of the negatives, did the chemistry remain?
The chemistry did remain. I still had
Interesting.
chemistry with him.
Okay. Well, that was
I
lucky.
just didn't care if he went and got hit by a bus after the chemistry.
Yeah, crazy. But, you know, I guess that is the power of chemistry, isn't it? Because if it also kept you together enough
Yeah.
that it didn't turn into an abusive codependence, right? Because
Yeah.
you did come out of it. But maybe if you hadn't had that chemistry, you guys might not have made it.
Might not have made it.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about it, but it's true. It could
Yeah.
possibly, because there is still so much of, I had such short-term memory loss for so long that I don't know if you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates, but I was not Lucy. There's a patient in there called 10-Second Tom, and that's who I was. That I would have to, we lived in a very tiny condo when I had my injury, and I would put on a sticky note going to kitchen to get water. And then every foot I would put a sticky note. And by the
Wow.
time I made it halfway down the hall, I'd forget what I was doing and I would have to follow my sticky notes back to my original message.
That's like smoking weed.
Isn't that crazy? And so I
Yeah.
started teaching myself that, trying to make my brain go further, that then I would start going, okay, well, how far can I go before I forget?
Wow.
And then I'm going to write that down on a sticky note again on the wall and then see how far can I go before I can't remember what I'm doing.
How long
And
did that phase last for?
months, months.
Wow.
And I still have a lot of long-term memory is just gone. Like it's weird. Small things are weird. Like I still, with my oldest sister's name, like I even forgot my siblings' names when I first had it, that there were several I couldn't remember. And to this day, I still have to think
Mind you,
about
there are 10 of them. Yeah.
there are 10 of them, right? But I still like will have to make myself think before I write Jennifer. Or when I'm doing Pilates, I'm still having to work very hard to make my opposite leg and my opposite hand go up. That there are still things that here we are, nearly 12 years later, that my mind is still working on, and my long-term memory a lot of that is gone, where like my college days and stuff, there's a lot I can't remember. My friends tell me I was so much fun.
Well, generally one is so much fun that one cannot remember. Yeah, exactly. But here's another question. You never fell out of love with horses during that time.
No.
Did you cease to give a shit about your horse?
Yes. I
Okay.
actually, at one point, but I think it was more after the beginning phase, no. But when I had my son, that being mixed in with postpartum depression and anxiety on top of the head injury, I
Okay.
nearly gave them all up. That my husband is the one that said, "You will regret this for the rest of your life, and I cannot allow you to do it. Send
Okay.
your horses to Missouri where it's cheaper. And when you are back in your right mind, we'll bring them back up." And
Okay. So we're going to now go forward in the story back to that. One
yeah,
last question though. Given that you know that I know that we now know there's a lot of neuroscience based around when your neurologist said go out in nature,
yeah,
but he didn't explicitly talk you through the sensory stuff that we now know about, for example, through movement method and how that fires the
yeah,
amygdala. And he didn't tell you about BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor,
yeah,
how neuroplasticity works with novel movement, and nature provides novel movement all the time, of course, and so on, Purkinje cells, all this stuff
yeah,
that it's surprising to me that he was a brain dude, that he didn't spell it out for you like that. Why do you
yeah.
think he didn't?
I don't know. To be honest, maybe he thought that I wouldn't be able to comprehend it anyways, that I was just sitting there muttering the same things that I kept asking him. I was like, when will I like that? How can I start to get back to work? When will my head stop hurting? Like, I think my thought process was so much smaller that maybe he possibly just thought it's not worth repeating this to this woman, because I remember that they did an IQ test on me and I scored very low. And I let them know that before that, I had a very decent IQ, that, things came very easy to me. I had a photographic memory that I could memorize an entire play in one night and feed people lines. Like, I now know why people were so incredibly frustrated with me in high school, because I never worked for anything and I got everything. And that did not come back. So everything that I do, I work extremely hard for. That I had to truly grieve myself like I died. And then I came back as a new person, because I was so different after my head injury that it was making me sick to think about what I had. And I felt just stupid. I felt like I was just this absolute Nimrod idiot walking around. And I had to tell myself,
Why did you
listen,
give a shit? If you didn't give a shit about other things, why did you care about that?
no, I don't think I had ever noticed how easy things were. And suddenly, when I couldn't do something,
Hmm.
it was like the whole rug got ripped out from underneath me and I lost all identity.
Right. And back, I guess, probably to the straight up toddlerdom type frustration at not being able to express oneself. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now I want to jump ahead. So you
Sure.
start this nonprofit, it goes slow, your recovery is coming, especially groundwork. And we know now, again, we talked about BDNF and Purkinje cells. Nothing builds that like working in hand with a horse, right? Because you've got
Yeah.
you've got to operate yourself, you've got to operate the horse, you've got to, there's just so many more moving parts in a funny way than there are when one's riding, and the relationship is more direct. Okay, so everything's going well and you get pregnant and you have a son and this is fantastic, and then
Yeah.
you get hit by postpartum and you want
Yes.
to give it all up.
Yeah. I didn't even love my son for 10 months.
So do you think that was linked to the TBI?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't think it would have been as strong. And that was so weird for me because I love babies and I was so excited to have a baby. And I remember him being born and placed on my chest and feeling nothing. And no one's saying that that sometimes happens, that women always think that they have to have this amazing moment. And yes, I've had that moment with one of my babies, but only one out of the three did I have that instantaneous moment. But it didn't slowly come back. It just kept getting worse. That I told my doctor that I felt like glass, that if someone touched me, I would shatter into a million pieces. And so then they went trying to find medication for me. What would help? I closed down the barn So I had a boarding barn with it that at 6 weeks, I knew I couldn't function. So I closed it down. I rehomed some of the horses that I had, and I kept the three that were the most important to me that I really had a deep connection with, and moved those down to Missouri. And then I picked up a nannying job to pay for them because I didn't want to get rid of them, but I couldn't.
Because you loved kids so much.
Right? I know, right? But I couldn't do computer work. So I was really stuck between this rock and a hard place of
Yeah.
needing to come up with $600-700 a month
Yeah.
and having this brand new baby and not knowing what do I do with it?
Yeah.
That I didn't have my family around. And I remember my therapist saying to my husband, I don't think you understand what a bad state your wife is in. Maybe you should let her go to Missouri. And he was like, no, I don't want to be away from my kid. But I think it would have probably been the best thing for me to have a tribe around me
Yeah.
where instead we
Could you not have imported them? Could you not have asked your mum and people to come up?
my mom was still working at the time, and so
Right.
all my sisters were, and so no one really understood what I was going through. And
Right.
then it was just a really weird time that we had sold our condo 3 weeks before I had my son, and then the other house that we were supposed to be moving into kept getting pushed back, that we had to move in with my uncle for a couple months. Then I moved into my in-laws house, and things were very strained with I have an amazing relationship with my in-laws now, but my mother-in-law and I were really, that was like her precious baby boy that now had a wife. And
Who didn't love him?
and
Sorry.
and I didn't love him. But she would come down, and so we were staying, and I'd stay in the basement every day. I just wanted to be in the dark with the baby. And she
Yeah.
would come down nonstop to make sure that I didn't commit suicide.
Why
And
did you want to be with the baby if you didn't love the baby?
it was such a weird thing. I can't even explain it. I wanted him next to me, but it was almost like I kept telling myself that I would fake it until I made it, that I
So
never
again, a
wanted.
little bit like when you had the TBI, that
Yeah,
subconscious part of you kicking in that says, I know this isn't right, so I'm going to persevere.
I'm going to persevere and do it. And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
I faked loving him. I gave him all the kisses, you know, nursed him until he was almost a year old, but had no connection until 10 months. Something clicked at 10 months, and I was just obsessed with him. But it wasn't until 10 months.
How interesting. Okay. So you go through this, and then at what point do you resuscitate your nonprofit and your.
So it was pretty much around that 10-month mark where I
Okay.
was like, okay, I I want to find me again. It was really weird. It was like a light clicked, and I was gung ho about finding me again and pursuing me. And so I had one of my little ponies when I was struggling so badly with my brain injury, where I was having trouble being coordinated and walking straight. I went and I grabbed the pony that I had it at a friend's house, and I went and I retrained him to be my service animal. And when I was with him, I noticed my anxiety was down. I could like control my level of emotions more. And so I had him everywhere with me. That if I
Like
went,
emotional support animal. You didn't teach
yeah,
him to drive an Uber.
right? You know what he did is he was so wonderful that when I was so unstable and stuff, that I would bring him into like the grocery store with me and hold on to him.
Really?
And he would pack all my food. I'd put it on around like a circ single on him, and I'd go and check out, and then put it back in those bags, and then he would jump into the back of my truck, walk into my house with me. I'd put away my groceries, and then he lived in my
Really?
backyard. Yeah,
Where is this horse now?
he's still here. So he now, since he was my service animal, I had to teach him how to be potty trained. And so now he goes into schools and nursing homes.
Okay, so he still
And
does that job.
he
How did you
still
teach
does
him
that.
to be potty trained?
Takes a long time. You literally sit out in the yard with your child, wait for a horse to pee. And as he's peeing, you say, go potty. You click and you give him a treat. And now, when we go to events, I can have him get out of the car, go to a mulch pile or the grass, and I tell him to go potty, and he pees.
What about pooing?
What I have found is it's really difficult not to get a horse to poop because if they have eaten, so I don't allow him to eat for an hour before we go somewhere. And
Okay,
I
it's
find
interesting.
that by not allowing him to eat for that hour, he never poops.
Because I had a horse which called Clue, who we used to ride, a quarter horse. We used to take him into all kinds of buildings, and I remember riding him onto like a dance floor, crowded dance floor in a club in Austin, and onto the stage with the musicians, and We did all kinds of crazy things with Clue. He was amazing. He was like the ambassador,
Yeah.
never once pooed. And it was after, like, I think I took him into a building twice and we had all the scoopers ready and he didn't. And I thought, I think he's getting it.
Yeah.
And I just had this faith after a while that he
But he
wouldn't.
wouldn't.
And he never
Yeah.
did. He never
I used
once
to have a
did.
little bag that I would
Yeah.
put on him.
All right. A question too about horses. The horse that threw you, what became of that horse?
Which one?
The horse that threw you. What didn't throw
Oh,
you? The horse that you had the accident with.
yeah, she's here. She's
Okay.
with me. Yeah,
Okay.
she is my heart horse. I love her
Fantastic.
to pieces. She is the alpha of the herd. And
Yeah.
that she is the one that she got
Did
really
I
sick.
meet her?
You did. She's my buckskin.
Okay.
Missy. Yep.
She
So
doesn't exhibit those extremes of behavior now.
no, but she truly was. I like to say that she made me grow as an individual and as a horse person. That she wasn't going to let me slide with what I knew. She was going to make me learn new tactics that were more beneficial to everyone.
It's great that you managed to not reject, or that your husband didn't insist, like, okay, this horse is dangerous, and that she now has her place in the therapy program. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
All right, so you fall in love with your son, you fall in love with your husband, then you fall out of love with your son, then you fall back in love with your son. You've still got the heart horse who caused the TBI thing in the first place. God, we horse people are strange.
Right.
Then it's funny.
I lost my whole identity and created a new one, but this horse will stay.
I think that should be the title of this podcast. That why are horse people crazy? We finally have the answer because we've all taken too many TBIs. All right, so now the nonprofit is beginning. At what point are you starting like the full-on rescue?
Yeah. So we had done in 2016, probably the middle of 2016, I really started to find horses, but they were finding me. People were starting to say, hey, do you think you
Sure.
could take this horse on? And I was doing well enough, but then I started to bring more kiddos into my program that I needed more horses. And so I thought, okay, I'll take them on. Let me see if I can rehab them, and I started really testing out what I had learned with Missy when I had my TBI and started trying these tactics on horses and going, wow, I'm getting so much further and I'm not having these issues when I'm riding because I'm solving all the problems on the ground. And it just kept building up from there that by the time 2018 came along, I had grown so much that I had moved several barns because I kept outgrowing them. And the barn that I was at, the manager said, why are you here? You're paying more in board than you are for a mortgage. And I said, yeah, but my husband said he would divorce me if I ever had my business in the backyard. And I really want to stay married. So she's like, there's literally a place less than 5 minutes from this barn. You need to look at it. It just, it's been for sale for a while. They keep taking it down, putting it back up. You've got to look at this place. And I said, no, don't even send it to me. Don't do it. And of course, she sent it to me. And I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this place. And so I say to my husband, would you go and just look at it with me? Just look. That's all I want to do is look. We don't have to actually do this. And he said that he went just to appease me and to really shut me up. That's what he has told me. And then he got here and he couldn't find one thing that he didn't love about the property. And the property was not made to be like a therapeutic ranch in any way. The driveway was like carriage size. The driveway ended at the house. The barn had a basketball court in it. It had a loft, rooms. I mean, it was not meant for horses. There was a stall barn, but it flooded really badly. And I loved it. I wanted it. And so he said, well, let's just go to the bank. I don't even think we can afford this place. I said, okay. And it ended up being that we were approved for the exact amount that they were selling the house for.
How interesting.
And so we put in an offer and the guy didn't want to budge on the price. He was like, no, you don't get anything with it. I want the price I want. And so we were like, well, you know what? We really love it. We'll pay him full price. Fine.
Yeah, sure.
And at the very last minute, like the last week before closing, our bank decided they wanted one more. Oh, what is it called when they see how much your house is worth? The name's escaping me,
Oh
but
yeah, the
yeah,
valuation.
yeah. So they came out and they said it was 20,000 less than what he was selling it for. And we thought he was going to walk away from it. But his wife by then had found her perfect home. And she
Okay.
told him, screw you, we're moving.
Okay.
And so we ended up here. And that really allowed us to blossom, was at the end of 2018. It allowed me to really grow in the way I wanted to. And I had no restrictions by other boarders needing the arena. And that it just allowed us to flourish. That then we started getting horses from auction for slaughter. And then
How did that
last,
happen? How did you end up getting horses from that?
so there was a guy about 4 hours south of here that someone introduced me to. And he has a meat truck that gets delivered. And he has 10 days to sell whatever's on that meat truck. And so he auctions those horses off, and whatever gets sold, and whatever doesn't loads back up on the meat truck and heads for slaughter.
And why does he get these horses? What's the infrastructure? I think a lot of people don't understand this. It's worth going into. So one often hears, "Oh, this horse was a kill pen horse," but what's a kill pen, right? What do people mean when they say that? So you really know this from the inside. This is actually
Yeah.
not my world at all. I've definitely taken horses that people have said, "I'm going to put this horse down," and I'm like, "Okay, fine, I'll take him." So it's
Yeah.
happened to me a couple of times, and they've always turned out to be fabulous. But I've never rehomed horses from a kill pen, just because
Yeah.
horses have never come to me that way. So I've always been a little bit intrigued by what do people actually mean by that. So can you
Yeah.
just talk us through the infrastructure whereby this man receives that meat truck and how these horses end up on this meat truck in the first place?
Well, and I don't think that people realize that there's such a demand for horse meat. That's
Okay.
why it exists. So they used to allow in a couple states within the United States to slaughter horses, and that stopped over a decade ago. And so the numbers started to drop because you have to go to Mexico or to Canada to slaughter a horse. But it went from like, I think 120,000 a year to, I think last year it was a little over 20,000 horses got slaughtered. But zoos buy the meat up like that because it's such high protein meat.
Okay.
There's always a demand for the meat there, but also there are places in Europe that eat horse meat.
No doubt.
And so, I mean, I
Not
would
pet food?
never,
Doesn't go to pet food?
I used to always think that it did, but the more
Yeah.
research I did, I found out more of it was the
Yeah.
zoo and for
Oh yeah.
people. But what I find interesting is there's really not a ton of regulation on, they tell you when a horse has to have their last meds or whatever before they're killed, but do you know that they're actually following that? That we don't know, because I don't think it's a very regulated system. I could be wrong there, but you really have no idea how long that they've actually been there or not. I think that
Okay.
most people have no idea that it actually exists still. They think that there's so many bad rescues out there that aren't actually rescues and that are getting all of this money in. They're very good at marketing and making it look like that they're helping out animals, but they're really not. And so
What does
there's
that mean exactly? Be specific.
so
So
like what are they actually doing?
are you saying that there are horse rescues out there that are actually just getting horses in and then selling them for slaughter?
Oh, I'm saying that I do know of one that I've been even told by a volunteer who used to work at another rescue that when they couldn't adopt out the horses, they just sent them to auction. And that I don't think happens all the time. I think most of the time when you have these false ones, they're not even rescuing the horses. They pretend that they're rescuing. They show you all these horrible images of horses, but they're not actually doing anything, or they're rounding them up and they're not caring where they go. That a
Interesting.
lot
And
of
this is
rescues,
this is a bit this is a problem. This is like a thing.
it's a major problem that I can't even talk about when it comes to, if I wanted to try and get a sponsorship from some type of large company, hello Shadow, a large company that actually deals with horse stuff, maybe boots or, whatever, maybe Ariat or, just big companies. When you apply and saying that you're a rescue, a lot of them don't even look at you because rescues get such bad raps that so many people lie.
A little bit like bad foster parents who are just doing it for the paycheck.
Exactly.
How interesting.
Uh-huh.
I had no idea. You'd have thought
Yeah.
I would have after so many years in this field.
Yeah. So I try very hard to be as transparent as we possibly can with our social media, with our online numbers of how much money we raise, everything. Because, especially when you're a smaller nonprofit, small nonprofits unfortunately have a very bad reputation as well, not just in the horse world, just any small nonprofit, of taking advantage of the tax exemption and donations and using that money for however they want and not
I
the way
think
that
that's
it
called
should.
a church. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, I know you're a Christian.
So we are, it does happen, right? So we are very good about that. If money comes in where people want it to go to food, we literally label that money as just food money. We
Right.
have it very strict within our accounting.
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there. Okay, so the auctions,
Yeah,
where are they held?
there's different places.
County
So
have them. Are they run by counties? Are they run by private companies? How does it work?
a lot of them are private, that there's just auctioneers. And then some of them, they have, like, there's one in Indiana where it's known as the kill pen auction or just auction horses, where people will put, like, just the regular auction, people will put like a certain bid that they have to meet on a horse,
Right.
things like that. The kill pen horses, you can see most of them look horrible. Though I have gotten really good horses that I did not have to do much with, and they ended up in the kill pen. That I don't think people realize that when you just give away a horse and you're not knowing where that's going to, if you're going to give away a horse, if you're going to, let a horse go for cheap, whatever, if you don't have a buyback contract, if you're not using a rescue to do that, that will actually take the time to check in again, you don't know where that horse will end up. We had something like that recently. My farrier, he was given this thoroughbred because he works at the track, and he was gonna retrain it and stuff. And some girl said, "Hey, do you want to swap horses? I really like the coloring of this one. And do you want to?" And he said, "Yeah, I mean, if you've got one that's already broke, I'll swap you." Well, then he got called up by like the board of the racetrack because that horse ended up at auction and it's chipped. So when they scanned it and they were like, "Why did one of our horses end up here?" So he almost got in huge trouble. And he's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, I just traded. I had no idea this girl was going to do anything." And
Wow.
it's just such a common thing that even my farrier is like, "What the hell? I didn't know that this existed so much." And I said, "When are you going to learn? If you have a horse that you need to like get rid of, give it to me. I promise you, I'll find
It's so
a home."
funny that I'm so used to it. Also used to horse people being so obsessed with the welfare of their horses.
Yeah,
We all are. That I think we just can't imagine this. And it's funny, when I was a boy growing up, we would have each market town, and it still happens in the UK, would have a horse auction. Melton Mowbray was the closest one to me. So we'd go down to Melton Sales
yeah,
frequently because they wouldn't just sell horses. They would have secondhand tack and
yeah,
other livestock. And it was just sort of a countryside thing. But you would sometimes go there to scan for something that looked useful. But I do remember often seeing horses that were like, there's no way this horse isn't, who's going to take this horse? So I presume the meat men must have been buying, but it wasn't overtly talked about.
yeah,
Even when you were walking around those sales, people wouldn't say, oh, those are the meat men. And it was all, even if it was in plain sight, it was hidden, I suppose. Or perhaps we
yeah,
were willfully blind. I don't know. Is that basically how it is then in
yeah.
the
I don't
North as
think,
well, would
I
you
think
say?
you're right. I think people don't even want to imagine that something like that could happen. And
Right.
yet it happens at such a regular rate that last year alone, we took in 25 horses that that were just in horrible conditions.
And it is so weird that we have no problem with raising any other livestock for meat. And in
Yeah.
fact, people who, so let's say someone raises beef cattle, and they could be all free range pigs, like real pride in,
Yeah.
and we would all consider, oh, that person treats his animals so well. The moment that person would be raising horses for meat
Yeah.
in the same way, even if the horses were so well cared for and looked fabulous, we would censor it, wouldn't we? We would say
Yeah.
that's beyond the pale,
Absolutely.
because culturally but it's so weird. When I was in Mongolia, I totally ate horse because
Yeah.
people, if a horse dies, they're not going to out there on the steppe. You're not going to eat it. Of course,
You're
you're
not
going to
going to
eat
let
it,
it go
right?
to
And
waste.
you're going to wear
Definitely.
it, and you're going to,
Yeah.
it's going to become your tent. It's going to become your boots. It's going to become everything. And it changed my attitude that way a little bit.
Yeah.
But it doesn't negate the welfare. Those Mongolians out on that steppe are looking after their horses very well. When
Yeah.
it's time for them to go, it's time for them to go. They
Yeah.
don't have someone who can conveniently show up with a backhoe
Yeah.
and take that
And I
horse
think
away.
that people, they don't want to think about what happens to the horse after they're done with it. Where I
Yeah.
find like here they really, really love horses, and then it gets to a point where it can't do something for them.
Well,
And
you know what the old way for the English fox hunters, and actually it's still that way, I think, in among the Americans as well. What we all used to do in that culture was when a horse, it was their time to go. The
yeah,
person who would come around and put the horse down always came from the local hunt kennels, and they would take the horse carcass and feed it to the hounds.
yeah,
However, it was put down in the most humane possible way. It was done at home.
yeah,
There was no transportation involved, no stress. The horse had its face in a, big thing of mash. People were crying, saying goodbye to the horse. The
yeah,
horse is now 30 years old, and doddering and time to go. And now it would be a lethal injection, and the meat is toxic. You couldn't feed it to
yeah,
anyone. It has to be incinerated. But it was actually a humane system, and I think it does still go on that way. So it's but there was no abuse of the horse leading up to that point. I guess that is the thing. When I saw those two horses, so
yeah,
listeners and viewers, the first time I went to Christine's, it was such an eye opener for me, because you just taken in two horses to
yeah.
therapy,
Willow and River. Yep.
and I got to see them luckily again 8 months later or
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. And they're
and
doing great.
they're looking, really good.
Yeah.
But my God, my jaw dropped. And I hadn't seen a horse. I lived in India for a while. There are street horses there. You want to see a starving horse,
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen anything like that since then. And I was just like, whoa, this happens in not just in America, but in Midwestern America, where there's like a lot of grass. Remember, we had
A
that
lot of grass.
conversation. I was
Lot of
like,
grass.
you have to try quite hard actually to starve a horse
Mhm.
outside of like January, because grass grows like
But
everywhere.
you know what I find? There's this weird thing here in Illinois. When I first moved here and I was looking for pasture board,
Yeah.
the woman that I called said, "You do know it gets cold here, right?" And I was like, "You do know there are horses, right?" Like, you do
Yeah.
know there's something in Illinois that's, and not everyone, but I find that this state truly likes to treat their horses like puppy dogs or something. That they keep them stalled a lot. They only go out on nice days. There's not this big thing into grazing. So there's this abundance of grass, but they mostly keep the horses stalled.
Right. But those people, we might not be happy with them stalling their horses so much or whatever, but the horses are well fed. To starve a horse
Yeah.
in Illinois is
Yeah.
tough,
No,
right? You
it
just have to lock
happens.
it in a shed, right?
Yeah. No, they leave it in a stall. Like we had, so Leo and River and Willow, who you saw,
Mm.
there were four horses on that property. And the owner kept two of the horses in the barn and fed them. And then Willow and River were kept in an outdoor pen that people were like renting the land from. And that owner walked by every single day and saw these horses literally starving to death, and chose to keep feeding his horses and not say anything to those people because he was getting a little bit of money each month to rent his land.
How did that end up? How did he end up getting, I guess, busted?
There was a camper fire on the property, And there is a law that whenever there is a fire, the sheriff's department has to show up in case there was arson. And it was
Okay.
clearly not arson. And the sheriff was just being nosy and shining his flashlight and spotted the two horses. And we got called.
Okay. And
So it
What
was
happened to the guy?
the owner got nothing. And then there was two different men that owned each horse. The the owner of River, who was extremely emaciated,
Yeah, I
he got a
remember.
slap on the wrist. And then the owner of the mare didn't get anything. And the owner, and I don't think what the courts understand is the only reason why that mare was in better shape is she was the alpha. So she got more food. She pushed him away from it.
Mm.
So he got off simply because his horse was shooing the other horse off the food. But it's very aggravating because the laws are not for the animals at all.
How often do you get a call like that?
Well, last year, I think about over half of our horses out of the 25 were extreme calls.
And how many of those horses make it into your program?
So we kept, I think, about six of them right now because our program's growing now that we're teaching,
Yes.
learn keen and really growing. We want to not start over of rehabbing the horse, let
Mm.
alone training it.
Mhm.
So we're holding on to some of the horses, but we don't have a lot of land.
Mhm.
So I really believe in being responsible and that we have to be horse helpers and not horse hoarders.
Mhm.
So it'll be 11 years in March that we've been doing this, and we've rescued over 125 horses.
And how do you manage to then, or can you? Is it even humanly possible to ensure that they don't end up in the same place again?
So we're pretty strict about it. We try to make it not where it's impossible to get a horse, but we find that because we are so open and honest about the horse's abilities, we don't lie about anything. That there are no white lies. And I find that a lot of organizations, just to try and keep helping animals, they try and get them out. But
Yeah.
my thought process is if I lie, even one small lie, that horse has the potential to end up back into this. And
Yeah.
so all of the horses that we have adopted out, we still stay in contact with the families. They become like family to us.
How do you find the people to adopt them out to? It can't be easy.
Social media has been our best friend. That we
Okay.
have a very good following. And I think because my reputation holds in a world where the horse industry is just known, I don't know if it's like this over where you are, but the biggest liars I've ever met have been horse people. I always
Always.
say
Always, always, always.
there is no gray in the horse world. It's black
Yeah.
and white. You either have really good people
Yeah.
that have just very good souls, or you have the worst people that you will ever encounter. And so if you think that they're the best people and months later they say something that just hits your soul the wrong way, know that there is something dark and nasty underneath there that I've never found a gray spot in the
Maybe
horse
it's the
world.
TBIs. I don't
Maybe
know.
it's the CBS. There's no gray. There's no gray. And I found no gray.
Okay, so it's astonishing. I take my hat off to you
Thank you.
because it's damn hard to rehome even a good horse.
Yeah.
Well, to rehome it well. I mean, if you've got a good horse, everybody wants that horse, but to
Right.
make sure that it ends up where it should end up. But when horses lack physical ability, or they're coming with so much trauma that your average person can't really deal. Rehoming them is not easy. It's an art. What do you think, beyond being transparent, what do you think the art is of rehoming the really difficult
We let
case?
them heal. You get a horse
Okay.
that people want. They may not be able to do everything that some people just want a pasture puff. But
Mhm.
I find that by first, rehabbing of getting their body back and then putting them out with my horses, kind of like how horse boy you learn through osmosis, you know,
Mhm.
that I'm doing that with my horses and I'm letting them
Mhm.
learn through the other horses
Mhm.
that they get to see how to interact with one another, but also how to interact with humans. And so I don't even try to jump in and say, you should trust me. I'm a good person. No,
Right.
I let them see that I'm a good person by interacting with my other horses. And then we start building on from there.
Right, but what about the ones that have, like, really come with, just big physical issues after what they've gone through? Had
So, So like physical issues like they're hobbling or like that
Yeah,
they're
like that they'll
dangerous?
just never be sound again. That they can't be a riding horse. They can't really even be that much of a working horse.
Yeah, I tend to
So
usually find them with like retired people who don't want to ride anymore, but they want to brush and love on a horse.
they want
And
something
so
to love.
I have found that I've been extremely successful at rehoming horses who can never be ridden.
Do you mentor other people who are starting rescues? Because this sounds unusually effective, what you're
I
doing.
I don't, but I love the idea
I
because
think you should. I think
so
you
many
should.
people tell me that I should just put horses down, that they come in like Toast, who is going to be our schoolmaster horse.
Get you with toast.
Um,
Sorry.
oh, Toasted Marshmallow, the love, that he came from auction for slaughter. He
Mm,
was over 400 pounds underweight.
mm,
He had a massive viral infection. His feet looked like dinner plates
mm,
when we got him. And he had been beaten so severely that he no longer had a flight response, but a fight response. And
mm,
when I got him, I was pregnant with my second, and I couldn't even work with him because when you walked into the pen, he tried to kill you. I mean, it was just flat
mm,
out. You had a horse in there who was ready to take someone out. And we said, okay, well, let's just feed him and let his wounds heal. He had a huge knot on his forehead. We see that time and time again, unfortunately. And it's when people are riding and they don't like what the horse is doing, they take a 2x4 and they hit them in the head while they're riding. I mean, it's just things that you feel like, oh my gosh, that could never happen. And yet I've seen it multiple times. And so, of course, he didn't trust people. Of course, he wanted to kill them. And because we take it slow and we allow, and truly, I can't take all the credit for Toast because Toast really changed because of a little 5-year-old nonverbal boy who would go up to his stall door and would shake it like hell while Toast had his butt to him because he felt he was just drawn to Toast. And Toast every single time would turn around, put his head over the gate, and would give kisses to this little boy. And it was that
uh,
child that made that horse, not me, but that child that told that horse that there are good people out there.
it's so interesting. I remember when my son and Betsy made their connection. I remember looking at that direct line between that little non-verbal autistic boy and
Yeah.
that horse and going, I really thought I knew about horses. I know a very little bit about horses.
Yeah. And I really felt like I had a handle on things. And then you came in last March and I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, I'm all for new experiences, but I also am very particular about how my horses are treated. That when you were talking about bits and I don't use bits, and I was like, okay, well, what kind of bit are you going to use? And what are you going to do? I was very on the edge about it, but I had this big talk with you and saying, listen, I chew everything that someone has to say, and then I will decide if I'm going to spit it out or swallow it. And you really went through and spoke with me about how important it is for you that horses are well taken care of and that they're a priority in this. And when you came out and you were working with Missy, Missy is a very unique being where if she does not like you and you keep pushing her when she says, I need a moment, you're going to see a major reaction out of her. And yet, the moment that she even started to say, I don't like this, something feels wrong with this, you stopped and you said, oh, you're such a good pony. Give yourself a moment, take that in, let that register of what we're doing. And it made me go, okay, this is someone I could follow. This is someone I could learn from. And what's been so beautiful with it is that by us taking, I'm now Horse Boy One, we did movement method certifications, and now we're into our second certification with Taki. But just since last March, changing how I work with my students and really doing follow the child and mirroring them. That one of our kids in our program, who's been with me for a couple of years and used to be so dysregulated that coming to the ranch wasn't a fun thing for him, that we started using your tactics and suddenly he's laughing and he's smiling and he wouldn't stay on a horse. And now he doesn't want to get off the horse. And he went from not using his talker and not using sign language to he said his first word since he was 2. The last word he ever said was daddy. And he said, go. And the parents are crying. And we're just completely so happy for him. But not only is it happening at the ranch now, he's now using the talker and he's now using sign language off the ranch, in school, at home, that we're seeing what you were talking about with us. And it's just so cool to go, man, we haven't even dived deep enough into this yet. That if we're already having these results, imagine what we're going to be like in 3 years. It's such an amazing phase for us to be in.
You're kind. If I owe it all to Temple Grandin, who mentored me and told me
Yeah.
follow the child and what follow the child meant, and obviously to my son and Betsy for showing me that radical transformation, and then obviously finding out from neuroscientists why that radical transformation had happened. But
Yeah.
I can't really claim credit, but I am, because I'm really just a vessel of
Yeah.
that energy, that approach, I suppose. But what I am so glad of is I could not have imagined when I was standing in a field 20 years ago with my son lost and not knowing what to do. I couldn't possibly have imagined that 20 years on, there would be hundreds of thousands of people around the world
Yeah.
basically getting what my son got and making the same improvements that my son made. And so I'm just really honored that you gave me the time of day, because for 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 my mission, it's I happen to be uniquely positioned in that I'm a journalist, so I kind of ask questions. So it was natural
Yeah.
for me to say, I will seek out a mentor. Who's that mentor? And that's how I came up with Temple Grandin. But also, I had horse skills. I was living in the country. So although I was broke, and I happened to have this really good neighbor who, that's why I make so much emphasis on tribe, who was the complete opposite political spectrum to me.
Yeah.
And we just liked each other anyway. We didn't care. And that's kind of how it used to be. It's getting more polarized now, as we know.
Yeah.
And we need to get back to that, because that little autistic boy doesn't care who you vote for. That horse doesn't care who you vote for.
Mhm.
That suffering person doesn't, all of that's really irrelevant.
It's
That's just
irrelevant.
monkey stuff. And one of the things I love about the populations of people that we work with, and obviously the horses too, is they just bring us back to exactly what's important. And that, of course, is immensely healing for us. So it's immensely healing for me. So when I came out to you, I thought, I don't really have anything to teach this lady, because I saw how you were rehabbing these horses. I was like, man, I mean, if she just goes right on doing this, she's grand. I mean, sure, there's a few tools I can share, but honestly, this is really great work. I'm just, honored to have you as a colleague.
Well, I really appreciate that compliment. But, I think it's really amazing that what you're doing, that even our foster care program that we run, where we pair up a child and a mentor once a week with a horse, and you're able to do takin with these horses and show these kids how to do this as well. That there's so much relatability for these children, that these horses weren't taken care of. They were
Mm.
abused, they were neglected. And then they got thrown out of their home, that they're coming into this new spot, new place, and there's relatability there. And then we get to say to them, oh, well, this horse gets to go to a foster home next week. Oh, this horse came back from a foster home. But did you know it's not the horse's fault? It just wasn't the right fit for them. We're here to find the right fit. And so it's amazing to be able to take these rescue animals that, have known what love is not, and put them in a place where there is love, and take them with children that don't know what true unconditional love is, and then place them with these horses, and then to be able to use takin with it, and they start rehabbing these horses with us is so cool. So cool.
It was a real revelation to me, the Tekin program, because it came, as you know, out of also desperation and necessity,
Yeah.
where we were running out of time to condition our horses, because we just had so many clients, and what we're going to do. And then it was like that duh moment. Like, of
Yeah.
course, the clients should be the horse trainers. Of course, they can totally do this, and probably better than us because their egos aren't as involved. And it was just this immediate, massive empowerment thing. But also, it took all the stress off me because suddenly I didn't have to do it all, and my wife. So, and I'm just very grateful for you to bringing that into the Chicago area and to people, like that. As you were saying that about love, it made me think back to what you said earlier in the conversation, though. I wonder if you're uniquely positioned in this to understand about the power of love because you lost it, because you lost love.
Yeah.
Maybe I think most of us can't imagine that.
Yeah.
I think that's really outside of my ken. Basic, universal, unconditional love. It's so much a part of me to think, wow, if I were to lose that, it would feel like being the undead or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. It's a very
Um,
weird feeling.
it. Do you ever talk to some of your clients who are going through stuff like this about your experiences? Do you share?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So we had even volunteers and stuff. I find that a lot of volunteers find us and they think that they're going to be helping. And
but they
instead,
turn out to be clients. Yes.
they turn out to be clients, right? That they get more
Yeah,
healing out of it because they weren't expecting anything.
yeah.
And so I've been introduced several times to people who have recently had TBIs and they're really struggling, the spouse and the person suffering from it. And I find that there's a level of comfort to know that someone else has gone through that,
Mm,
that they've made it out to that other end, and that I don't sugarcoat it. It's hard. There's a lot of pressure put on that other partner. I mean, my husband is truly an incredible man to have held on when I was so cruel.
nice.
That to know that I could come back, but to also
It's
be
brave
patient
of you to
enough.
own it too. I mean, there must have been a temptation to keep that private because there's shame involved. There's
Yeah.
regret. You know, but by owning it, you let everyone else own it who's going
Yeah,
through
I think I'm very big into I always say that my goal with Triple H is to knock down social barriers and to make things that are taboo at this moment,
that.
to
Mm,
just knock them off their rocker and to make it a normalized thing. And
mm.
so I have been very open about my past between I had a brother-in-law assault me. I had the TBI. And I find that when you are open about these things, and you don't make it sound like a shameful thing, because none
Well,
of
right,
it
but you also don't
was.
paint yourself as a victim. I think what's so cool about it is that you say, no, look, it made me behave really badly, rather than poor me, I was sort of the hero in the story, even though you had no choice in it, even though it by no means was your fault. I think it's the bravery of owning that to say I was cruel. That is a really hard and brave thing to say. I don't think you give yourself enough credit there.
Well, thank you, because I just think you got it. You have to. I want other people
It's
to.
kind, is what it is.
Yeah,
It lets other people heal.
I think so. I think so. I think that that's what I want for people, though, because I don't want people to struggle like I've struggled, and I don't want people to be ashamed like I have felt shame.
Mm,
And so I find that if we use our voices, and I always say, and I know you believe in this too with your tribes, that the world would be a much better place if we had a community again. That
mm.
if we were to take care of each other and talk about our problems instead of just, I have a very strict rule here. If I ask you how you're doing, you better not say fine, because I will dive into your soul. You better believe it. That fines are not allowed here. You can either tell me that life's great, life's just mediocre, there's some things with work or school or whatever, or you can sit there and say, can I just talk in your office? And you can just cry on my shoulder. But I'm not going to have a fine walk through my door.
I'm thinking about the passive aggressive. Fine then. Fine.
Fine.
I won't
Fine.
say fine. Fine. They will find me.
That would be my 7-year-old.
Tell me about your team. Tell us about your team. We've heard a bit about your equine team. Tell us about your human team.
Yeah. So I like to say that everyone finds me, that people tend to say that when they walk across our threshold, something feels different. They feel like the outside world disappears. And so what I have found is it draws in people that maybe no one wants to give a second chance to, or that they're struggling in life. And so one of our team members has a learning disability. And when he started with me, he had an aide that came with him from school and literally had to be taught how to hook up a hose, how to stack hay, how to do animal care. And now he's been with me for 6 years, and now he has a paid job, and he gets to teach others how to do things. And when he's learning something new, because we don't hold expectations that everyone's the same, we know that we take it and we break it down for him. And it's not that he can't learn, it's that society believes that he has to learn at a certain pace, that no one's giving him the chance. And yet, our program has shown that he flourishes if you just slow it down and give him a moment to grasp what he needs to do. And don't say, "Do you understand it?" But instead say it back to me. What did you get out of that? You're able to see what he comprehended and what he didn't. We've had multiple people come through with addiction. Several of my team members have had some type of addiction in their past, or they're currently working through an addiction. And it's a space where no one hides anything. So people talk freely and openly, whether they've been in recovery for 3 months or 30 years, that you have a space here where there's no judgment. There's just a space of healing. And so it's a very interesting dynamic that I have, because most of the people that are on my team have had zero, zero knowledge in horses. And they were just drawn to this place for whatever reason and are now learning from the ground up, which I don't mind, because we know that there are so many bad habits in the horse world of how they teach that for me, yes, it's extra work in some ways, but in other ways, it's less work because I'm not having to rebuild get rid of a bad habit and then put in a good habit.
Mm. Yeah, I'm just thinking, of course, it's the bad habits that brought the horses to you in the first place.
Yes.
Uh, I'm just thinking too about your experience with the TBI of also losing your IQ and losing your ability to learn.
Yeah,
This also gives you a uniquely empathetic
absolutely. I always say
position.
I was a compassionate person, and then I
Mm.
became an empathetic person
Yeah, yeah.
because I
It's
knew what it was like.
exactly
And
say, dude, I have actually been there. Yeah, yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
it makes
That's
me so
you.
much more relatable, because I think
You need to
with
be running
people,
trainings in this. You do.
I
You
sh-
need to create like, okay, you're doing my methods and great, that's grand,
yeah,
but you're bigger than that. When you put together your Triple H method, given that you are uniquely poised to understand what it is to lose love, to lose intellectual ability, to lose sensory processing. I don't think many people in our field are quite so positioned. For example, you haven't met her yet, but there's a genius lady who does horseboy movement method and technique in central Germany called Gitti Berghoff. Amazing human. Hope you get to meet one day. She is also the mother of a son who had such severe spina bifida
yeah,
and hydrocephalus that they said to abort him. They weren't going to do that, but they understood why the doctors said it and
yeah,
therefore what was coming. They've It's been a great success, but not without great, struggle. But she, before she got into all of this, she was a dementia nurse, and there's unique
yeah,
things she understands that she can bring to the table. But I think to have gone through it yourself, like that early dementia, I would be very, very interested to see and actually to help you when you feel ready to structure out.
yeah,
We need more and more approaches. We don't just need horseboy movement methods again. We don't just need path. We don't just need lifemanship. We need an infinite number of these things because there's an infinite number of contexts. So, for example, when you come up with that, I would totally take your training
yeah.
because I'd actually want to be trained by you. for that.
Oh, thank you.
And then I'd want to integrate that into what I was doing, nick all your good ideas, claim they were mine, because I've had so many TBIs that, clearly, what I'm going to do.
I know. A few falls. Yeah. No.
Lull you into a false sense of security. But no, I mean, it is unique, Triple H. That's why I had no hesitation right after I did that first thing with you. And even though the horses were somewhat unformed at that point by,
Yeah.
our tackine standards, where I'd say, no, these guys have got it. They're going to get there. So I immediately sent that family to you, then subsequently showed up, and I was like, that's exactly what they need, is that environment. And any, listeners and viewers, if you are in the greater Chicago kind of area, and I would include upper Indiana and lower Michigan and all those places, you want to go check out Triple H. If you've got anyone who you feel could benefit from them, and crucially, if you want to donate,
Absolutely.
you can't really do better, because the money's also going to go to rehabbing these horses that by all rights shouldn't be able to make it, and do.
Yeah.
It's an extraordinary achievement. And it's what I love is that it's just the beginning, I feel, Triple
I
H.
feel the same way. I feel like I'm just at the beginning of this door starting to open, and it feels really good.
So where's it going? Where do you want it to go? Let's dream. Money's no object. I don't want to be reasonable here.
Yes. Well, I don't believe in being reasonable. So not my big dreams. But everyone told me Triple H wasn't going to be here. So I'm like, I have my people around me that keep me grounded, but my feet are off the floor, because I figure if you don't dream big, nothing can be possible.
Sure. Also,
So
what's the fun? Yeah.
where's the fun in that? Where's the fun? So, and you've got to have fun in this, because you deal with such extreme cases between kids that come in and the abuse and neglect that you see and you hear and you read when you're doing your intake assessments, to the horses. You have to be able to have fun in this, or you burn out.
Right. If the problem that we're dealing with, suffering, the opposite of suffering is joy. You cannot have joy without fun. It's actually a tool. If we don't have it, we can't do the job. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Absolutely.
So let's hear the dream.
What we're wanting to do is, within 2 years, we're wanting to raise funds to purchase a second property. And this property is specifically for adolescent girls and mental health crises.
Okay, cool.
Because I had one of my nieces attempted suicide when she was 11. And I've been wanting to do this since I was 16, but it became, my own experience of seeing what these girls go through when they either do attempt suicide or they're having these ideations of it. And you get thrown into, a mental institution with white walls, nothing with nature. And a lot of times there's just pills thrown at you.
It's so bizarre, isn't it? The moment someone's suicidal, they put them in a place that makes them want to kill themselves.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And so, like for my niece, my sister had asked, would there be, a strip search or whatever, that she'd want to be there? Her daughter's only 11. They said no. Yet when she left, she was stripped. And so, like, my niece has all of that trauma of these adults staring at this 11-year-old who's just in her bra and underwear, and them checking her over to see if she's hiding anything like that. She's gonna, so there's trauma that comes from trying to seek help. And what Triple H wants to do is to create a space with cottages instead, and have 2 to 4 girls living in a cottage.
Sanctuary. Yeah.
Yes. And having a rage room and Reiki and horse therapy and just all different modalities of healing, and having a large pond that they can row across, really being with nature to heal, going on trail rides together, having a big mess hall where we talk together, we watch movies together, that it becomes a community. And that instead of these girls coming up to me that are in my program and they say, Miss Christine, I was only in for 10 days instead of 21 this time. And you have to be so proud of them for that. We are failing our kids. We are absolutely failing them. That is a Band-Aid. And I want to be a place that has residential, but then also has programs that are outpatient programs that you can keep coming back to, that we don't cut the line with you just because you're suddenly better. No, we want to get to the root of why do you feel like you're not worthy of being here? Because you are so worthy of being here. You have so much to offer. And we want
Mm,
them to feel that too. So that's like our 2 year goal of raising enough money to purchase a second property for that. And then we have a 5 to 7 year goal where I really want to go into the prison systems.
mm.
Because when you look at foster care statistics, 1 in 4 kids within the first 2 years of aging out will be incarcerated. And 80% of current prisoners in our system right now have been in foster care at one point in time. So, for the ones that I missed, that I didn't get in my stable moments program, I then want to have a prison and parolee program where we go in and we take these horses that would be killed at slaughter and instead using methods like Takin and my own to rehab these horses and have them find these incredible homes. And then you're already giving education and skills to these prisoners that either, if they're lifers, okay, then they have something to do that they're not just sitting. But if they get out, then we have a parolee program and we're a stepping stone where we take a chance on them where no one else would. And
Right, and if they were lifers, they could still rehab the horses and give the
absolutely,
horses a second life. Yeah.
absolutely. But the reentry rate is so incredibly high. And it's because no one, once you have it on your record that you've
Mm,
done something, no one wants
mm,
to take a chance on you. And I want to take
mm.
a chance on people. Not that everyone will make it. I'm not naive to that situation. But for those that want it, I want to be there for them.
It would be really interesting to trace the TBI line all through foster care,
Mhm.
all through incarceration, all through, that I bet you that there is a skein
Probably.
to be detected. And I wonder if there are multiple ones
Yeah.
because somebody might have had like shaken baby or fetal alcohol or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they get beat up as kids and things happen with that, with the brain. And then they get beat up as adolescents
Mhm.
and. I wonder if it many times often just goes back to something as almost biomechanical as that,
Yeah.
which then resonates
Very interesting.
all the way through.
Yeah.
And then even if it didn't, if you took the approach that it had happened, you would for sure get a good result. So, for example, as you know, I often wear a dressage hat now as well. I go out and teach people that.
Yeah.
I want them to do dressage, not stressage, and something that's nice for people and horses.
Right. I love that.
So, well, like horse yoga, really. And the the parallel, what makes me a better teacher with people is because I now treat everyone as if they were autistic. And I find if I just abide by the same rules
Hmm.
that I would abide by if someone was really autistic, then I'm probably not going to trigger. I'm probably not going to this. I'm probably not going to that. I'm going to think about the environment. I'm probably going to keep my voice soft. I'm probably going to this. I'm probably going to that.
Yeah.
And I'll just be less of a prick. And it's funny because, prickishness can creep in
Yeah.
in that type of thing. And it's funny, I've caught myself a few times going, "Ooh, Rue, you're kind of verging towards prickishness here." And then I'm like, "Oh, well, what would I do if that was an autistic person and I was getting impatient or something?" It's like, I'd apologize.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting. So I've got this thing of now I'll apologize to my clients. I'll say, "Oh, sorry, let me just own that was so not you. That was so me. It was just
Yeah.
purely that, I didn't sleep that well last night and I am a bit tired. And,
Yeah.
I let me just own that. Can we just rewind?" And I apologize. I sincerely apologize. And it's funny, no riding instructor ever did that, let alone a
Yeah.
parent to me. But I think if you were to apply the TBI rules and how it would have gone well with you when you were in the worst of it to kind of everybody,
Yeah.
how can you go wrong, really?
Yeah.
It's sort of a lesson for ticking the baseline,
Hmm.
and not deviating from that baseline. And I
Yeah.
think there aren't many people who really understand that baseline like you do in our field, because not many have gone through it, or some may have gone through it and not known that they've gone through it, because
Yeah.
lots of us have taken knocks to the head. I think what's very different about you is that you're conscious of the whole thing, and you can kind of chart the chronology. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does.
What we haven't asked you
Yeah.
is, what do the three H's stand for?
So it actually was done by my sister. It was hands, hooves, and hope. But it was such a mouthful that we literally rebranded and got rid of that one and just put Triple H.
Because it's so funny, Triple H, it sounds so good, and you don't even think, well, I don't need to know what that is, because it's like all these ranches, they will have these like Easy L or
Yeah.
Flying B or something, and it's like, well, okay, it's just a Western sounding thing, which probably does go to like some family name or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. No,
Um,
it was just my sister came up with it. I needed a name. I couldn't think of one. Yeah, and probably because I was suffering from a TBI, that creativity in me. And she came up with it. And then we let that one go because I didn't know enough to know that, oh, I could just like, do a DBA as Triple H and totally just let Answers and Hope go. I started all the paperwork and the money again.
oh,
Again,
yeah.
wasn't quite with it with my TBI, but
Are
I
you creative? You said you weren't creative because of the TBI. Do you have creative outlets outside of this?
yeah,
What do you do?
yeah. So for me, I love to like knit. I'm like a little old lady. That's something
Okay.
that I
Did you
really
knit your
love.
shawl?
I did not. I didn't.
Okay.
No,
I was gonna say,
this
because
was
that looks like a
Amazon.
professional job.
I can't take credit for that. I like to do like baby blankets for people, blankets for my living room, like little baby hats. And so I love doing stuff like that. I love to read. Like that's something I really love. I tend to do Reiki on friends and family when they want it. That's another one of my outlets that I love. That
So the reason I ask is, describe to me the loss of creativity and describe to me the experience of refinding creativity.
I think I have a deep appreciation for joy now because when you lose it, that I didn't have, like with knitting, I didn't have the coordination to be able to do something like that. That when I would try and even do it, I would give myself such a massive headache from trying to figure it out
Mm.
that it was not fun for me. That I used to golf a lot and that coordination thing, like you lose all of that. And so I think I have an outlook on life of, and I think that's why I don't hide anything that's happened because I think too many times in life, the way that people show themselves, that if you look at me right now, you'd be like, oh my gosh, she's got these three beautiful children. She's a pretty woman. She's got this amazing husband. She's got this career going for her. And I never want people to think that that was an easy thing and that I just got it. I want people to know that you can work hard and go against those waves crashing down on you, and you can still find success. You can still find beauty. You can still find joy in things. And I think all too often when we look at someone, we're like, oh, well, they just have luck on their side. And my marriage didn't start out like that. Before I even had my TBI, Matt and I had very, very bad communication skills. We did a ton of therapy together, and we've both worked very hard on ourselves and on our relationship. And so I think it makes a difference to really appreciate what you have and what you've worked for, and finding that true joy in it because you didn't have it. That every day that I can wake up and write an email or, go out and work my horses and not be tripping over myself. It's a beautiful day to know that some people don't get that back.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember when I smashed my legs up and I was lying on a couch for a long time, and I realized what a blessing it was to get up off a couch and walk to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Like, and I remember the first day I could, I'm like, I will never take this for granted again.
Yeah.
Does it really come down to gratitude?
I think so. I really think so. I wake up every day feeling so blessed and really deep gratitude for what I have. Really deep gratitude. I do not take
Well,
it for granted.
I'm very, very grateful for you, and I'm grateful for the work you're doing. Can you? We're sort of now at the
No, we
We
talk a
come
lot. You
to
know
our
me. You
yeah,
and
I
I are
think,
quite the talkers.
well, what a surprise for me anyway. But, well, what an excellent story you've told, an inspiration. People now need to know how to find you, get in touch with you. So let's do the plugs. Can you give us all the coordinates,
Absolutely.
emails,
So
passwords?
even though we say Triple H, it's literally spelled HHH Ranch. So if they want to find us, they just literally type HHH Ranch and then Illinois into Google and we pop right up. If they
Right.
want the actual website, it's www.hhhranchil for Illinois.org. And
Okay.
then, like we talked about with the donations, everything's tax deductible. We are a 501c3. So they can always get that little extra incentive there. That is, they don't just want to give, but they want something in return, they can get it.
Absolutely. If people want to reach out directly to you, I presume there's an email link on the Triple H.
Absolutely. There's a
Triple
contact form.
H .il.org.
Org.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So
And
they
they
can
can
just
reach
go
out
on
to you.
there and they'll find all of our information. And then we're
Fantastic.
on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, you name it, we've probably got it.
Okay. And if anyone is out there thinking to be a horse rescue, now that we've been educated a little bit in what a bit of a minefield that is, including if you are doing it ethically, that people might assume you're not and not want to support you, I suggest you reach out to Christine, who will mentor you a bit with this. If you're
Absolutely.
going through TBIs, if you're going through depression, if you're going through postpartum depression, I suggest you reach out. If you are looking for how to bootstrap your nonprofit, I suggest you reach out. I've been to her place a few times and it is fab, and it's getting fabber. How much do you need to raise for those dreams, those 2 and 7 year, 5 to 7 year phases?
So we have found a place that we really love that is on 20 acres and it already has the plumbing and the water and the electric all set up that we could literally do little cottages, build them around them. And that facility they are wanting 600,000 for.
Okay, so you need to
Has a
raise
lot of
600.
updates that it needs, but the initial to even get the property, we're looking anywhere from like 600,000 to $1 million.
Okay, and then to develop it, another 600,000 or more.
Probably more, about $1 million.
So
Really,
really, you need to make 2 mil.
yep.
Okay, so Triple H needs 2 mil, lads. That's very reasonable in this day and age.
Yeah.
Who wants to step up? Shall we do a little crowdfunder, maybe, or something?
Be
Crack
fun.
knuckle.
I like
Okay.
it.
All right. We'll talk. We'll talk because
Yeah.
I believe in it. I believe in the project.
Thank you.
I'd like to see it work.
Me too.
I think everyone listening and watching would as well. Okay, lads, we have a mission.
Woohoo! Let's do it.
All right, and I will see you. This is January of 2026. I will see you hopefully in June because we're
Yes.
going to the Michigan area again.
Okay,
Well,
wonderful.
again.
Yeah, and if not, I'm wanting to come over to Europe too. I figure I'll
Doors
visit my
wide open
sister and
right
pop
now.
around and see you.
You know
Yeah.
where to find us.
You're just a hop, skip, and a jump away.
I am. Well, these days, everything is from everywhere. All right. Until the next time, Christine, thank you so much. It's been
Thank
a
you.
break.
This has been wonderful. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine assisted field or are considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Taquine Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop. You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.